strategy. So the three of us today are going to be walking through how we can use the creative that we spoke about in last month's episode and utilize that in a multi-channel approach for e-commerce success, new customer acquisition, and revenue growth. So this is going to be a little bit more, I guess, kind of practical application of how we can go about finding new customers and expanding reach and expanding audiences. As usual, any comments or questions, leave those in the comment box and we'll either come to them while we're speaking or we'll come back to you at the end. I'll be following up with all the attendees and people that have registered with us today. You'll be receiving a free white paper about multi-channel success and multi-channel strategy as part of your registration. So keep an eye out for any LinkedIn DMs or emails from me. We got quite a lot to get through, so we are going to get started straight away. And I'm quickly just going to recap what we went over in the last episode. So in this series of webinars, each one kind of leads on from the next. So if this is the first time that you're joining us, we'll probably be mentioning a couple of things that we've already spoken about. So it might be worthwhile just going back into our on-demand section of our website and just catching up with a few of those other webinars, just so that this one might make a little bit more sense. But in terms of what we covered last time, we spoke about the true meaning of social first creative and what that means for brands. We went into detail about the different styles of creative, so campaign creative, UGC creative, behind the scenes creative, and which platforms lend themselves best to each different style. We spoke about how to make impactful creative with little or no budget, how to adapt that brand story that we discussed in episode 2, and how that can then be implemented across all of the different styles that's needed for those platforms. And then we spoke about how to test and report success of creative. So hopefully, having thought about that in your own brand and your own teams, you have some ideas about creative that you might want to start making. And this episode will be looking at how to then use that across different channels. So the first thing that I'm going to speak about is the importance of being multi-channel. I think previously when digital marketing was in its infancy, or as brands were just starting to become a little bit more D2C, selling through e-commerce rather than bricks and mortar store, it was very much a two-handed approach of Google ads and Facebook ads. And they were kind of like your choices in terms of where you need to be. And if you were on both, that was great, but you could kind of get away with just being on one. That is absolutely not the case anymore. And not just because audiences are spread so far and wide across lots of different channels, but it also means that if a channel was to go down, for instance, or if, I don't know, something happens with legislation or like the TikTok ban, for instance, where suddenly you've then lost a complete revenue stream because you've got all of your eggs in that one single basket. So from an audience perspective, it's really important, but also just from a safety perspective in terms of making sure that you have some kind of tap that's always running rather than having everything all in one channel. In terms of an audience perspective, this is what Google have coined the messy middle. They did a study a few years ago about consumer behaviour and what they've called the messy middle, which is almost an evolution of what we would see as kind of the standard top-down marketing funnel. So pouring in the top, coming out the bottom. They've now coined this messy middle, which is less of a top-down approach and more of a Mr. Messy maze of an infinite loop of exploration. So we've got exposure around the outside, which would be considered kind of your brand awareness or any upper funnel activity that you have running. Triggers is what would trigger a customer to begin looking or begin discovering, begin purchasing. And then you've got this loop of exploration and evaluation, and this could be what would be classed as kind of your middle of funnel. So people making decisions, doing a lot more searching across lots of different channels, looking for social proof, looking for recommendations, word of mouth, referrals, all of those things, and really evaluating your brand up against your competitors. And then the experience there is then your on-site experience when it comes down to purchase. So that would be kind of what the UX of your website and your website experience looks like. The key thing I think to think about when we talk about the messy middle, even though this has been coined by Google, any of these stages can take place on any platform. So exposure could come from word of mouth. The exploration and the evaluation could then happen across 3 different social channels before the experience or the purchase might be in store. It might not even be online. Audiences will constantly flip from one platform to another as they work their way around this loop. And there's no kind of indicator anymore of whether people need 8 touch points or 80 touch points before they make a decision. And for luxury brands in particular, we know that that purchase journey can sometimes be a little bit longer. It's a more considered purchase because the product value is higher. So when we talk about kind of 7-day last click attribution models, doesn't really lend itself to a cycle that works in this way. And research has showed that by being on multiple platforms, you're actually increasing your incremental revenue. So this is a study that was done by Magic Numbers and OMG. It incorporates kind of econometric research and econometric studies. And what this chart shows in particular is what you get from increasing the number of channels that your brand is present on from 1 to 5 using the same spend. And the econometric reports between 35 and 65% more revenue. And you will then double the effect on brand metrics, so brand recall and brand reputation. And that's information that's come from Kantar. So this is kind of data proof that it is worthwhile being on more than one channel and not necessarily having to increase your spend significantly, but just making sure that you have a presence across different platforms. The more channels that advertisers are incorporating, the bigger the effect that that's having on ROI and revenue. So making sure that you have a kind of carefully planned media stack and having lots of smaller exposures is bigger than kind of chucking all of your money in one place and expecting all of your customers to come from there. The thing with that is making sure that everything all gels together in a cohesive way. So that's going to come down to what we've spoken about before in terms of making sure that you have a consistent brand story across all of your creative, all of your messaging, your website, your search ads, so that everything's all consistent. And that doesn't mean that everything needs to be the same, but there needs to be the same kind of emotional through line or story or tone of voice or however you want to phrase it. But I think this is a really key piece of data that shows that the more channels that you're willing to test and you're willing to be on, the better your overall revenue is going to be. So not revenue in channel. We're not looking at platform analytics. We're looking at overall gross or net revenue across everything. So I'm going to hand over to Andy, and Andy's going to talk a little bit about how you can decide what channels to be on and where that audience is.
Yeah, I guess as the first bit to answer the question, where do we start really? Well, when we're looking at multi-channel, we have to start with the audience, because that would exclude or include certain channels and certain ways in which that audience searches, understands product, finds solutions for their problems, etc., etc. So where you start really is your audience. And quite often we get to the point where we engage with a new client and start working with them, and we ask them questions about, who their audience is. Do they know how they buy? Do they know what problems your product solves for the audience? And often there's some idea, or there's a piece of guesswork that's gone on, or a very sort of basic piece of analysis that's gone on over the past X amount of years that might be out of date and might be inaccurate. So what we always say is, start with your audience and just ask them. And we went through this in some great detail, so in the last episode in this series, so I won't go into lots of detail, but the nuts and bolts of it is just ask them. You know, a simple SurveyMonkey questionnaire, which asks them a variety of things. So we did this for a client last summer when we wanted to really understand a number of things like what motivates them to buy, what social channels do they use, how do they feel about delivery? Do they feel it's expensive for international delivery, or do they feel it's about what they're happy to pay? What do they think about the quality of the product? We asked them about the problems that they're having, and this is a footwear client. So what is it that is the challenge for you? Is it you're looking for style versus comfort, or you're looking for style and comfort? Is it something that you use all day? Is it something that is more for evening wear? Because this particular footwear brand, you can kind of use it for evening wear and also day. So we really understood, off the back of asking 600 of these existing customers, a whole raft of pieces of information that really shaped the strategy from a multi-channel perspective, and also the international strategy, because those questions are asked across multiple different territories, and you do get some variations between cultures and warmer locations around the world or cooler locations around the world. And how we did it is we incentivized them with a 10% discount, but actually out of the 600, only 6 people actually took the discount. So my point there really is you'd be very surprised at how much your customers are willing to help you and give the information, give their insight in order for you to further your knowledge and your targeting of your products to new customers particularly. Because if you've got information about your existing, if you replicate that across people that don't know you necessarily, you're into the gold mine of growth. And the other thing is Google Analytics and also industry trends, the basic things that you would do. But most brands that we talk to, they've got extensive Google Analytics data. They know GA4 by now. They know trends that, often they look at places like we look, like magic numbers for numbers and things like that. So the big thing that I would emphasize before you look at adding layers of strategy to your multi-channel and your international approaches is just to get back to basics and ask your customers first. The next stage that we often come across is that clients say, okay, I understand that. So what you're saying is we need to be visible everywhere, across every channel, at all times of the day, night, and year. And that's not possible, and it's for a number of reasons, budgetary-wise, even with huge £1 million budgets, you can't be all things to all men and women at all times of the day, night, and year. But more importantly, even if you did have the budget for that, it's not good practice. Marketing is often about providing a product that solves a solution that your customers have got, and that product and that solution typically tends to be geared towards a specific part of the market, not everyone. So understanding who that is and targeting it specifically is a much better way of doing it. The other point to mention, which is on the next slide, is that some channels play a heavier role at different stages of the funnel and different parts of the messy middle that Danielle just talked to us about. And often people think, right, Google Ads is only bottom funnel, meta channels are only bottom funnel, and things like TV is upper funnel. But as Danielle mentioned, over the last sort of 15, 20 years, actually this messy middle has become messier. And it's not as clear to say TV plays a role here and Google Ads plays the conversion role at the other end of the spectrum. It's actually not the case now. And part of that is because the products themselves that Google offer have merged and blended into more. So for example, demand gen, they have a demand gen campaign and have done for a number of years now, where is a much more upper funnel approach to the channel versus, for example, a shopping campaign, which is much more, do you want this now, this size, this color, come through to the website and buy. So what's the starting point? The starting point on the next slide is you need to think, and we talk about this all the time. So if somebody's listening in that's heard this before, apologies, but it's for the people that are new on this webinar, it's worthwhile just very briefly mentioning it, and I will be brief with this, is to keep things simple. Our funnel that we design for clients, whether it's international growth or regional growth, is centered around 3 key pillars: build, story, tell, and sell. often the mistake with clients is they use a particular channel like Google Ads and Facebook and Instagram for 3 great examples of this, where people get this wrong, or brands get this wrong, is they go straight to the sell. And the analogy that we use is a bit like going into a room of people that don't know you and asking every single person out on a date until someone says yes. The better way to do it is to go into the room, build a bit of an audience, build some rapport, tell some stories, and those sequences of conversations and events will filter out the people that are not right for you. And you'll get to the bottom of the pile or the end of the night and find some people that are right for you. And so translating that into the e-commerce world, we want to build our visibility to new customers, because that's where we're going to grow from, specifically from new customers. But we want to build from customers that have an intent to buy from us. So a lot of the research that we do goes into informing that build stage. The next stage is, once you've got people's attention and you know that they have an intent to either follow or buy at some stage in the future, we've got to deliver a why. So why should they care? And often, as human beings, right back to the caveman and woman days, storytelling is a key part. We used to draw, pictures and stories on cave walls, and that's not changed since. So we engage with other humans and other brands via, sometimes quite simple and cost-efficient storytelling, but nonetheless, that story tells the build stage people that are now waiting to hear from us. It tells them why we should be of interest. It tells us what products we've got and why the solution our customers have got are right for the products that we offer. And it also gives information about the quality of the product, where we're based, the history. All these things can be told very cleverly in a quite simple story. And at that point, then we're in a position to ask for the sale. And those 3 things really are where, as brands, you need to start, and also analyze where you are at the minute, because in these webinars, we get people, businesses 50 million plus, right the way down to startup brands. So if you're a 50 million plus brand or 20 million plus brand even, go back to what you're doing in terms of your multi-layered strategy and your international layered strategy, and work out, are you efficiently hitting each of these 3 pillars correctly? Do you have activity across different channels that fit in the build stage, that attract and tell stories, and then that sell? Most likely you'll have the sell stage nailed or to a certain degree. So build and storytellers where they fall down. If you're a new brand, start with this. This is your starter for 10 before you even spend any money on Google Ads or anything else. So what does that mean in terms of channels? And just going back to my point earlier, that historically the likes of Facebook and Instagram and Google search, whether it's organic or paid, has typically been seen to sit in the sell stage. But actually this complex, messy middle, and how these products within these channels have all changed over the years, has made this quite a mix. And you can see in an example here, these are channels that we use for existing clients at different stages of the funnel. So yes, you've got things like YouTube, which you'd expect are a good building and getting your product out there in front of your target audience channel. But also things like Meta, Instagram and Facebook particularly, are really good visual ways with a specific type and style of ad to get in front of a new customer and tell them we're here, and then lead them nicely into another ad that is a bit more about maybe product focus, that sits in a storytell stage, and then it brings them through to the end stage. So actually, places like Meta, if you've got campaigns set up for each specific area of these 3 pillars, can actually perform really pretty well across all 3 and be the basis of your multi-channel, multi-layered strategies. And more recently, I mentioned television before. Typically, the build or awareness stage for going back 20, 30 years has been, television, because the sort of readership at a 7 o'clock slot on a Saturday night is millions and millions of people. But actually, there's quite clever ways for lower budgets to do that. So connected TV is part of it as well, which we may come on to later on or in another webinar. So think about these particular areas that actually play different roles at different stages of the funnel if you treat them differently. So, for example, you have a very specific type of ad on Pinterest that is very different to what the same channel you use to attract in and tell a story. So those two ads are not the same. A build stage Pinterest ad is not the same as a storytell Pinterest ad, and that's not the same as a sell stage Pinterest ad. So we have to think differently at each of these stages. And I believe, Danielle, we did, I think it was a year or so ago, we did a webinar on this whole storytelling thing and what you should do and how you should do it. So I'd point you back to the resources section on our website to look for that in some more detail. But Danielle, I think you're going to talk us through a bit of YouTube now, aren't you?
Yes. So probably one of my favorite channels. I talk about YouTube a lot because I do think it's really underutilized. YouTube's developed so much, I think, over the past even kind of 5 to 10 years. It's gone from being essentially what is quite a scrappy video sharing platform to essentially being used as an entertainment channel. I watch a lot of YouTube. Friends of mine watch YouTube instead of television. People more and more are watching YouTube on smart TVs. So it's prime real estate really for brands to be able to have that kind of silver screen experience at a digital price, and for it to be able to be served digitally so that you don't need to pay a media buyer or you don't need a separate team, the way that you might do if you were to look into traditional TV buying. Interestingly, again, this is data from Magic Numbers. If you're not following Magic Numbers as a marketer, I think go and follow them on LinkedIn, sign up to their newsletter. The data that they have is second to none. This data in particular has actually come from Ofcom and from Barb being the broadcasting reporting network. But you can see here that YouTube reaches the most amount of online adults of any ad carrying platform in the UK. So if we're looking at luxury brands who have a slightly older target demographic, YouTube is the perfect place for you to be serving that build and storytell messaging. It's a visual platform, so video is the best format for discovery anyway, in my opinion. So making sure that you do have strong video creative, I think, is key. And also kind of the different video formats that you have or campaign formats that you have on YouTube can make it really cost effective in terms of kind of in-feed and skippable and the way that the pricing structure works for some of those ad types. If you can get a really strong message before your skip button appears, then essentially you're getting visibility for free because you're not going to be charged. So there's loads of kind of workarounds that make it really cost effective, which brings us on nicely here to the charts that you can see on the right hand side, which is the difference in CPMs when we're looking at cost to route for TV. So obviously broadcaster TV being fairly good value for money in comparison to CTV, which is served programmatically, which I'm going to talk about in a second. But YouTube there, that tiny little red pillar being way below in terms of CPM. So if as a brand, you don't have a particularly niche audience and you're looking to kind of reach as many people as possible and you're looking at target CPMs or, a larger reach, YouTube's a really great place to start because you can reach a lot of eyeballs with not a huge amount of budget. It also means it's great for testing. It's a cheap way to test whether messaging and things work. If we're looking at split time per day, YouTube's not huge, but it's significant enough that it deserves a place on that wheel in terms of where adults are spending their time. So I think taking a look at your Google Ads campaign, I'm assuming that most of the brands that will be joining us will have Performance Max set up with video assets that will be supporting some kind of YouTube visibility. I would be worried if you didn't. But maybe taking a look at testing either demand gen or video display as a separate campaign so that you're able to control that individually, I think would be a good test for you to do if you're looking at kind of investing in YouTube a little bit more heavily. Google also released some interesting stats about YouTube viewership. So if you wanted to make sure that your audience were there, you can go ahead and have a look at that just to be sure. Or as Andy mentioned earlier, just ask them. If you're sending out a survey, just ask them if they're watching YouTube or not. And you'll be able to see whether or not it's worth investing your time. But I definitely think, having a discussion about whether or not you should be taking it a little bit more seriously, I think is a good place to start. If we're going to take TV a little bit more seriously, then there is a potential for brands to have a look at connected TV. And again, we did a webinar about this in 2024, where we spoke a little bit more about Netflix specifically and how that whole situation works. But in 2025, in the US specifically, there is currently an estimated 69.2% of the population engaging with CTV content. CTV being kind of anything that's served programmatically over a streaming service. So new signups for streaming services are opting for ad-supported tiers when they are available. So Netflix having an ad-supported tier, Disney Plus having an ad-supported tier, and Prime now being ad-supported. So numbers suggest that more and more consumers are opting for these ad-supported tiers rather than the kind of traditional SVOD tiers where there is no ads. So when Netflix first announced that there would be an ad-supported tier, there was a little bit of grumbling about whether people would actually use it. Well, data suggests that they are. So it is a good place to start. In terms of how that works, that's a whole other discussion. So not something that I'm going to necessarily get into now. But that is just to say that Netflix, Prime, and Disney Plus can all be served programmatically through various digital ad exchanges. So if you're running programmatic through an ad exchange currently, there should be some parameters that allow you to extend into these channels. AdSmart from Sky has been going on for ages, it seems. So if you're looking to reach Sky and Virgin Media customers, AdSmart is the place to go. The targeting through AdSmart is incredibly sophisticated. They use the Experian mosaic and loads of consumer data to be able to find those niche audiences. So if you're looking for TV style ads, but with less wastage, that might be something that you want to have a look into. Sky Advance is like the umbrella of that, which allows you to tap into all Sky products. So that's looking at Sky Go and also display programmatic available on Sky Publishing, so any kind of Sky-owned websites. And then for brands that are looking to expand into the US, Mountain is a really good place to start in terms of a self-serve programmatic platform for US-based streaming services. So Peacock, Max, ESPN, and CBS. So if you're looking, as a brand, if you're looking to expand internationally and you want, especially in the US, and you're looking for brand awareness or visibility before investing in kind of those conversion or bottom of funnel ads, then that might be a good place for you to have a look and to research. They also have creative support available. So if you're looking for video or creative support, then again, a really good place to have a look. As I said before, this is a whole kind of separate topic, but I think it's a good way of thinking about how to get that multi-channel aspect, and mostly starting at that kind of top of funnel exploration that we saw in the messy middle, because I don't know if Andy would agree, that seems to be the bit that most brands that we talk to are missing. Yeah. They have that kind of middle funnel UGC styles starting to creep in, and then a lot of conversion, but they're missing this kind of brand awareness piece that both YouTube and CTV, if that was what you're interested in, would be a really good way of fulfilling that gap. So with that in mind, I'm going to pass over to David, who is our Chief Testing Officer, to talk about if you were to branch out into a new channel to kind of bolster your multi-channel strategy, how would you go about testing those channels?
Thank you. Yeah, exactly. So as we entice you to add as many channels as possible, relevant channel to your product, your market, and your business goals, when you will want to add a new channel to your whole marketing machine, what we strongly advise you to do is possibly freeze everything that you're doing and add one new channel at a time. Because if you're doing several stuff at the same time, and especially for channels who won't necessarily show you a sales and revenue number. So let's imagine CTV, for example. If you really want to measure the impact of adding that new channel, you will want to have only this kicking in at a time and for a relevant period. So we haven't really talked about that, but yeah, I guess a test is at least several weeks. Start with a small budget, or depending on the platform, sometimes you can't really say a budget, but you can say a maximum reach or a maximum spend or a target price for a given action. And then don't just look at in-platform analytics. And as I just said, for platforms that won't necessarily show you a lot, like, for example, CTV, or if you want to add, for example, a video engagement campaign, we won't necessarily show you revenue and sales data. The impact of what you're going to do will most likely spread very on a very wide spectrum. So for example, if you do video engagement, CTR will assess how your audience react and engage to your creative, and you need to start with that. But then the impact it can have on the overall channel span is going to be much wider. We can totally imagine a video engagement campaign boosting, for example, your direct visitor on the direct channel in your GA4. We can also imagine that it can boost the organic search or brand searches that will lead to your website. And so this is something that you need to pay attention to. And don't hesitate to fail fast and move on. Sometimes the channel might not be for you. If you have a creative that has been tested very successfully on other channel and you believe it's right for the channel, but for any reason the CTR is not great, or you don't get some successful results, it's not a big deal. There are plenty of channels out there. Just, I try other creatives, but if it's really not for you or your brand or your market, then switch to another channel and move on.
David, I'm wondering if you might be able to give an example. I know I'm leading you to water here. Give us an example of where we've run video engagement and have seen a wider impact.
Exactly. So we did that test very lately. We set up a video engagement, and it was for the US. So US being very, very big, we targeted a given state. We froze everything else. We started that video engagement campaign for only 20 quid a day, which is very reasonable budget. And then after some times, we had a look at GA4 and the overall revenue in Shopify for that given state. And we measured with both before we did that video engagement on the same year, but also on the previous year. And we saw that a big difference, a big changes. I mean, almost 3 times the sales and revenue VS without doing that video engagement campaign on Meta. So this is exactly how we did it, and it showed to be successful. But for example, the same test on a different state in the US showed some positive results, but not as big as that first test on that first state. And so this is exactly how we can see incrementality and kind of A/B test. But again, the rule in testing is change only one variable at a time, because otherwise you don't know what caused the impact you're seeing.
Cool. And the difference between what we saw kind of ROAS-wise in Meta and what we saw in the overall revenue, there was a marked difference, wasn't there, that showed that?
Yeah, very good question, because a video engagement campaign, basically how the algorithm work, it won't target people very, ripe and mature to buy. And so typically your ROAS and your sales data will be poor on that type of campaign. What you want to have a look at is how much does it cost me to drive a visitor to see my video more than 3 seconds or a significant amount of time, and possibly to drive people to your website. But they might not click on that video. They might click on, they might go direct, or they might look up for your brand on Google. So exactly as you just said, if you just judge by the in-platform reporting, you will think that this campaign is failing and it's not worth it. So, and you of course you want to have a look at the CTR, because you want to make sure that your video is driving traffic to your website. And then when reporting success, so your first goal is, if you're, let's say you're doing an Advantage Plus campaign, or a campaign that is based, that goal is to sell to people, which is most likely a bottom of funnel campaign. Your first goal is to get a minimum of 3 times ROAS for this type of campaign. But always look at the wider impact of out of ROAS and on platform, and keep in mind that in this multi-touch world, people seeing ads from that campaign might not buy right now, but if on the bigger picture it brought a positive impact to your bottom line, then the goal is reached and you smashed it. So do not unplug that operation and that last channel you added. You could use attribution software like Northbeam, Triple Whales, or Funnel if you have the availability to. So basically, those platforms will tell you that this new channel that you just set up and this test that you're doing, it plays a role in your sales funnel and entice people who saw it to buy. So it's quite nice too. But if you don't have the budget for, or if it's an overkill for you to do it and to put that in place, again, the method we just talked about, which is freeze all your marketing activity at this one and see after a couple of weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, what it does, is still the best way to do it. Ultimately, check the gain in performance brought by a new channel via, as I said, either a previous period, which could be last month, last week, last quarter, but also maybe year on year at the time where the channel wasn't active. And then sometimes, switching off campaigns and monitoring the impact of switching off something might tell you if the channel was bringing a positive input or not. Sometimes you're doing things, you've been doing things for a while, and you're like, well, it's not successful. Before on Facebook or Meta, I was seeing a nice ROAS, and now I'm not seeing a ROAS. I should unplug that campaign. Well, unplug, but have a look, because if you see your figures, your sales figures dipping, it could be that people are just buying a bit later than before after seeing the content of that campaign, and they come back to another channel. So really, really pay attention to this.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that as well, sometimes switching things off can be a good kind of indicator of, as you mentioned, David, like incrementality. So we have conversations. I know Andy has conversations with clients where they say, well, would we have gotten that revenue anyway because of an upswing in seasonality, or, we're coming into peak. So, demand is starting to climb. So would we have seen that revenue anyway? Well, if we turn off the campaign and the revenue tanks, then we know the answer to the question, don't we? So I think it's sometimes can be just as good of an indicator as continuing to measure ROAS, especially if it's playing a part higher up in the funnel. You should hopefully notice overall revenue dipping rather than just the metrics that we see in platform analytics.
Exactly.
Andy, do you have anything else to add in terms of reporting success, or maybe how you go about speaking to C-suite or managers in terms of reporting success?
I think in terms of reporting to the C-suite, I think often it really depends on the type of person or people that sit at the C-suite. In my experience, you typically get two types of people. One that sort of pass all of the decision making down to the marketing teams and have a very, very sort of pragmatic approach, which is, I understand we need to spend some to accumulate some. Let's do some testing and find the best path forward. For those types of leadership personalities, as it were, we do lots of micro tests that DJ mentioned, sort of touched on a few of them, but we do lots and lots of micro tests with low levels of spend to prove concept and then scale from there. It becomes a bit tricky if the C-suite need a proof of concept before you do any testing, which we come across a few times. And in those occasions, it can limit growth to a certain degree. Marketing is all about understanding the basics of the channels that are working for you. But true growth comes from new customers, and new customers often is about testing new strategies and techniques, even to a certain degree. And that requires a little bit of flexibility, as it were. So I think in terms of reporting back, it really depends on understanding who you're reporting to and trying to put together some kind of testing system that A, they would approve, and B, that leads you on to ultimately where you want to be, which is spend some money in a new channel. But yeah, it really is dependent upon who your boss is, basically.
Perfect. Well, we've come to the end of today's session. We have run over slightly, so apologies for that, but hopefully you found everything that we've spoken about today useful. This has been a very kind of top-down, whistle-stop tour. We could talk about this topic for hours, I think. So if anyone does have any questions, please let us know, because we'll be happy to dive into things in a little bit more detail. And as I mentioned, if you need to go back and watch any of the other episodes, either in this e-commerce successful storytelling series or any from 2024, where we dive into the art of storytelling and those upper funnel channels, then visit the resources section on our website, revenuegrowthagency.co.uk. Head to the on-demand section of our resources, and you'll find every webinar we've ever done listed on there for you to watch. There's no sign up required. You can just watch them in your own time directly from our website. So check those out, and we will see you next month for the last installment, I believe it is, of this.
Yeah, webinar. I think it is, isn't it?
Thanks, everyone, and we'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.